Hey everybody, it's Rob here. Welcome to my tier list for the best builds and classes for Season 5 from the PTR. Now, there will be another final patch coming and things might change. In this case, I will update the list. But I hope this will already give you a good idea of what the current power level of your favorite class and all the other classes is as well. And what you can expect for Season 5 for your favorite build. So one thing as a disclaimer before we get started, there were a lot of bugs and things were extremely hard to test on the PTR. And this is just my best guess and just most of the information that I could gather here from the community. I already accounted for several bug fixes. There was like several things here where characters did like 4 quadrillion damage and just a bunch of bugs with some items. And there's also a lot of new and cool uniques such as that are like defining for almost every build, such as the Crown of Lucian and the Talisman Lord, as well as the Shard of Varanthil, significantly buffing basic builds and just a variety of skills. And all these might change as well. In fact, I would not be surprised to see some of these items tuned down a bit for the sake of class balance. But this is all in a good idea, I hope, because we want to have a more fair balance for the game. So let's get into the class tier list here. I made kind of a bit different format, and I focused also on like speed farming and tormented boss killing and basically not only about pits, but still the main focus is on pits because that's what a majority of people in the end game care about. Before we get going with the tier list and all the new guides, a quick word from my partner and sponsor Into the AM. You may have seen the awesome shirts that I've been wearing during my videos and streams, some of them even in true Barbarian fashion for even more DPS. They're super comfortable to wear even during long blasting sessions in the summer now. There is a new collection available on the website right now. If you follow the link on the screen or in the description, they have a bunch of new designs and also a 30% site-wide off that stacks with my own creator code. How else would it be? Rob2628, that you can use on top of this to get a total of 40% off. You can check out all the new different designs and get your shirts now for the summer to upgrade your wardrobe with Into the AM while supporting my channel here at the same time. So thank you, and now on with the tier list. So coming in here at number 5 is the Sorcerer class. And I will show you like a written version of the tier list at the end here as well as we talk through it. But the Sorcerer has been nerfed pretty significantly. They have kept a bunch of passives all around the game. They've also gotten rid of the Perma Flame Shield immunity and these kind of things. But there are still some pretty cool and new builds on Sorc that I hope and also assume that some of the lightning stuff here gets another buff here because it's a new build and I think it should be strong. But here Lurkin already made a cool video here from the Splintering rework. This is a lightning Sorc that wasn't played so much and I wanted to highlight this build here real quick. And you guys can see here, he's just basically using the lightning to just seek the enemy and kill everything. This is like a 101 speed run. He also did a pretty high clear with this build. And it looks extremely strong and it's all based on this aspect here, Splintering Energy, that has been reworked, where your lightning spears causes like to arc and deal a lot of damage. Now you can also play with the new pants and the chain lightning Sorc, but there was definitely some problems and it was more like on the weak end. We'll see later where it like places in the middle of the tier list, but it's like more on the weak tiers, not in S and definitely also not in A tier. So I'm kind of hoping for some love there for the Sorcs. I think the Sorcs really need it. And let's jump into the Excel sheet here that I'm also going to be linking below. And you guys can kind of see here the Chain Lightning Sorc only makes it into C tier. Then we have in B tier here like Pit 130 for sure. We have this new Splintering Sorc. There's also an Andariel Sorc. It has been buffed quite a bit. You guys can see here the Andariel's Visage. We're going to talk about that later for Rogue as well. Has received some pretty significant buffs here, like 100,000 and more dot DPS. For those kind of builds. And there's also the Blizzard and the Frozen and the Ball Lightning Sorc, also with a potential Ver bug fix. This is the key passive. It might even jump into A tier. And yeah, the Splintering Sorc is pretty good, and hopefully the Chain Lightning Sorc will get like a buff. I'm kind of expecting this, so it can maybe move up into like A tier. And the highest Sorc build that I was able to find here is still the old Firebolt Shatter Sorc. Even though with Immortal being gone, Shatter is still strong and one of the stronger builds on the Sorc, especially you know, with the new shard buffing the basic skills to even crazier levels. And this was already like a basic skill with Firebolt. So this is kind of expected to still be the strongest Sorc build, and I really hope that Blizzard for the final patch is reconsidering fixing the bugs in the Lightning build, but also buffing the Lightning Sorcs here, so they can at least be into A, maybe even into S tier. But yeah, for me, the Sorcerer is coming in at number 5, last place in terms of the classes. Then at number 4, we have the Necromancer, in my opinion. So the Necromancer was basically the class to play, especially for the start of Season 4. Many people, including myself, call it the season of the Necromancer. And the Necromancer has actually been like kind of brought like somewhere close to the Barbarian level, which was their intention to do with the Book of the Dead reworks and things like that. But then one major problem that happens now in the current season is that they are basically changing the minions and nerfing them again, especially the Shadow Blight on the Necromancer received quite some changes here. I mean, we're not playing it in this build, but that is basically the Shadow Blight and the affix associated with it, and he's losing a lot of multipliers for that, and this brings all the pet builds and a lot of the other builds, also the Shadow Necromancers in general, because they were playing the Wither node, and this has also been kept now. It sadly brings it down, and there was a lot of frustration in the Necromancer community of like why this Necromancer gets a nerf and why this is happening. And I personally kind of agree. I don't see why they want to like nerf the Necromancer again when they just brought it up to be at least somewhere close to where the Barb is at. And I really hope that they look at this again and maybe revert some of the changes that they did to these caps on some of the Paragon nodes. This is a general problem, but also to some of the generic multipliers such as the Shadow and Blight aspects here. So kind of the best and the big winner of the current patch here are all the Bone Necromancer builds. Like there's Bone Spirit and there's also Bone Spear. They both have a tremendous scaling with Essence and also with the new kind of items that you can get with the Crown of Lucion, also the new amulet here and some of them, even though there could be a nerf to this one. So there's like a very cool synergy here happening with these new builds here that are very, very strong for these Bone Spear Necromancers and also for the Bone Spirit Necromancer, of course. So they have been moving up. The minions have been losing a lot. So maybe even the Bone Spear will move up higher because there's been a big synergies here with the new update. Like, you know, the Bone builds, they can scale with the amount of essence that you have with the ossified essence. And this one is also uncapped completely. And it's gonna just go higher and higher and it keeps stacking. And all of these new affixes and new uniques here have maximum resources on the items. So that's gonna be extremely helpful for these kind of Necromancer builds. So you see here we have Bone Spear sitting comfortably in B tier. And in A tier here we have the Minion Necro that came all the way down from S tier. I think it's still decent, but not strong enough. I have like some footage here where it's like pretty easily clears 110. But then there is, in S tier here, there's a big surprise here with the Bone Spirit Necro. This was already an extremely strong build. And it's even stronger right now, essentially one-shotting all the bosses. And I've also seen some footage from some Chinese or some Asian players that have basically been blasting this in like 140s, and it might even be able to see, you guys can tell here like how it's one-shotting the boss. You might be even able to see this one completely dominating in the high pits as well. But yeah, this is a very strong build. You see, you get a bunch of essence back whenever you shoot this Bone Spirit, and yeah, the Torment, this is level 200 bosses, they just boom, get one-shotted. So this is pretty insane, and it's a very strong build. But yeah, minions have lost a lot of stonks, and sadly down now from S tier all the way down to maybe A tier, maybe even B tier. Like, it was very difficult to find a lot of content because there was so many bugs on the PTR and people weren't able to test. But yeah, for me, guys, Necromancer comes in at number 4. Number 3, you guys can see here, and this is some good news for the Druid players. Druid used to be one of the weaker classes, but now definitely received quite some buffs, especially on the Earth builds. There have been a lot of reworks, a lot of buffs to like a generic skills and passives in the Paragon tree. Especially some of the core skills with some of the Shepherd shifts and power shifts have received a pretty big nerf and a pretty big buff. And I think the big winner here are the Earth builds. You guys can see me here playing, testing this. I call this the AK-47. This is the Landslide Druid. There's many variations of this build, and you guys can see here how it works against Lilith. Like, you just go on and you cast your Landslide, and you pass your Creeper, and he casts your Landslide as well. And it basically just completely obliterates like all these bosses, and also high pits. I'm kind of expecting this to be able to do at least in the mid 140s, maybe even 150, and I was able to hit here for billions of damage. And yeah, the playstyle is like you just run around and you cast like your poison creeper that casts your landslides. You can also cast your landslides yourself, and it just does a lot of damage. You guys can see here, boom, like it just like one-shots that pack. You just charge and trample in, and poof, the pack basically dies. And it's a pretty cool, pretty strong build, and there's a very cool sound effect to this. So this is like one of the strongest builds, Landslide Druid. I have this put right into S tier even, like low S tier for the Landslide Druid. That's pretty strong. And there's also some other cool builds that you can play. I've seen my friend Small Petting Zoo here even play this on his minion companion Necromancer, companion Druid. It's like so goes with Necromancer, but he was actually able to clear like 120, like very easy on the PTR. And keep in mind, all this PTR footage that we have here, on the PTR, the pits were really, really hard. So you can at least add another 10 tiers, maybe more. And he was speedrunning this 120 here with the companion wolves. The wolves got a tremendous buff, and he's like basically playing with wolves, and that is the main DPS in this build. So that's also a pretty cool playstyle, and people might be able to min-max and cook this a bit further. And I'm pretty sure that is going to be tremendous for the Druid. So finally there's some love for the companion, and not only does the Necromancer have a build with minions, but the Druid has it as well. Even though like the Wolf Companion here is sitting in B tier, there's also like a Cataclysm Druid you can play. Tornado, Hurricane are still pretty decent. But I think the big winners here is Landslide, is Pulverize, are the Earth builds. Wind Shear, I think, with the new shard is still very strong. I have Wind Shear here in 80, and again, the full tier list will be in the description. You can just scroll through and check this yourself. Wind Shear was one of the best builds, but there's definitely some nerfs to Wind Shear. But even though there's also some buffs, and especially with the Shard of Varanthil here, that build I could see move up in places for sure. And that is basically my number 3 pick, the Druid. Coming in at number 2, having a total of 3 builds in S tier, is surprisingly the Rogue. The Rogue has gotten a lot of buffs. Especially, what I think it's benefiting the most from is the new reworked Andariel's Visage helm here. It's this helm, and they actually quadrupled this. It used to be like 20 or 30k, and now it's like north of 100,000. You can even get this to 150 on a barb if you play like a mace and stuff. And there's also a build on the Sorc for this one. And this is basically just buffing the poison builds here tremendously. You guys can see here, like we just fight Duriel, poison him for all of his life instantly. And there are various clears. I think there was 150 or 140 clear with this Rogue hitting for a couple billion of damage here. I was able to play this build like very briefly, and you can kind of see the numbers here. We're actually hitting like into the billions on these target dummies. Obviously, it also depends a lot on CC, and my gear wasn't perfect, and there was also various bugs, such as with the malice, and some of the multipliers weren't working. But this build will do multiples of billions of damage every second as a dot. I think the top rogues here, there's a clear here, I mean, there's different variations and different ways you can trigger the Andariel. A lot of people used to do Flurry and Pen Shot, or there's also like all kinds of different basically ways to trigger this. I'm not sure which the best build is to trigger this, but basically Andariel Rogue is sitting comfortably at S tier if you're using one of the main ways to trigger it. I was using Puncture and Flurry on my build, and he's using like some different skills in this video, and you guys can see here on the boss, his dot damage is pretty insane. You guys can see here, like it's ticking for billions of damage here, 1.6, 1.7. taking down this boss very comfortable, and he beat 140. Now, given there was some bugs on the rogue with the exploit weakness, doing way too much damage and basically executing the monsters, but it's still an impressive boss kill here, and I'm pretty sure this build is gonna do 150. So this is just one of the rogue builds here sitting in S tier. It's the Endaria rogue. Then there's also the Penshot rogue. I have 150 clear here on the PTR, but there was also a clear here on the live server, and this is not getting many changes. It's actually getting some buffs. And this guy here, he beat level pit tier 159 with this with this rogue. So yeah, the penetrating shot is going pretty crazy, and he just managed to take down this boss and actually has like more than a minute left. And this is up to date right now the highest solo clear I've seen out of anyone. So this is even higher than the Flay Barbs. So if we switch to the live tier list here in the document, this is the live tier list. The current Flay Barb did 158, and this Penshot rogue did 159 and one higher. So if we're switching back to the PTR tier list, this Penshot rogue is still going to be insane. Now, there was some bugs on the PTR with the dagger and the totem bug here. You can see this on the rapid fire, yet another S tier rogue build. I think Deadmods posted this here on X. Right. You can see here how he's completely melting this boss. But again, I did not account for these bugs. I think even without the bugs, these builds are extremely powerful. He hits for 23 billion. That's obviously some bugs. So it was very hard to kind of gauge these builds. But I'm pretty confident that these three builds are going to be sitting very, very comfortable in S tier, and are going to be some of the best builds of the entirety of Season 5. And then, obviously, coming in at number 1, numero uno. How else would it be, my friends? It's the best class in the game, the Barbarian. Now, the developers have said that instead of nerfing the Barb, they want to bring up all the other classes to the Barb level. And I think that's the best idea, because nobody really likes, like, nerfs and nerfs and nerfs. And they've already done a lot of nerfs with how they, kept all the multipliers and the Paragon nodes, or the Thunderstruck, or the Burning one, or Wither, or Hemorrhage, and like all these kind of things that have been kept. And I always feel like it's capping the fun. So I feel like rather than, like they did this with the Necromancer in a good way, and now they just nerfed it. So I was like hoping that they revert the nerfs on the Necromancer and also bring up all the other classes kind of to the Barb level, like they've been saying in interviews. And obviously the Barb at the moment on the PTR is going crazy, and a big contribution of that is the addition of the new items. This is for all the classes, and I could see them, tune these down, because they said they don't want mandatory items. And they gave this example of Tybet's Will in Season 2. So I think there's a good chance that the Crown of Lucion, I mean, at this point it's a new unique, basically, without being one, gets a bit of a nerf, and I think that would be a good thing. Maybe same for the Talisman, and maybe also same for the Shard of Veranthil. Because you guys know, basic builds, and I mean Bash and Flay, and also like basic builds on Sorc and Heartseeker, Rogue, and all these things, basic builds have been dominating the meta the entirety of Season 4. And with this Shard, basic builds become even crazier. And I don't think it's necessarily healthy for the game if every build is a basic skill build. Like we need some buffs to like core skills and these kind of things, right? So I think the idea here of adding like a weapon with a downside was pretty cool. But making your basic skills basically into core skills with this weapon and making them into spenders. But there's like just so many ways with Starless Sky or the Crown of Lucian to neglect this or negate this effect. So in the end, it just comes down to a ×4 damage buff. And this is like some D3 kind of numbers or multipliers. And I don't think it's healthy for the game. So I could see, and I'm going to leave this in my feedback as well, like maybe rework this a little bit to kind of break up the basic skill only meta. Because we have it on Barb, guys. The strongest build of the current season, of Season 4 on the Barb is also the strongest build. And this is top of S tier as well, not bugged. It's the Flay Barbarian. You guys can see me here. I'm just doing a Rupture here for 500 billion damage. So the Flay Barb is already the best build for Barb in the game, and it's getting even stronger on the PTR. No bug interaction, 500 billion damage. This is at least 10 times of what any other build can do that is not based on a bug. And I didn't like count for the bucks here. I didn't list them. So you guys can just see me here, like this target, man, is freaking bleeding for 11 billion. Like this is twice a second. That's 22 billion damage every second, plus a half a trillion damage per rupture. And they even buffed the wanton rupture to have more frequent ruptures. So yeah, that thing is going completely crazy. And this is the strongest build in the game. I had like no problem at all clearing like 140, 150 on the PTR, even though it was extremely difficult. And I think if this goes live, the Flay Barb, like it is right now, you know, the live clear is 158 and the build gets, I don't know, another 4x damage or something. Even the Flay duration tempers being gone but shifted to the utility slot doesn't hurt the build as much. And then it also gets the new shard weapon here, making it completely ridiculous, even with the hemorrhage cap. So I could definitely see, and I would also want this build to be tuned down a bit, because else it's gonna do 160, maybe even 165 come season 5. And this is, I just don't understand like why the strongest barb build gets buffed over and over again. You know, I'm all good with buffs, you know, especially for the barb, but I mean at some point it gets ridiculous if the strongest build in the game keeps getting buffed, keeps getting buffed, keeps getting buffed every patch until, you know, it's just alone in a tier of its own. Not bugged, guys. This build will do 160, and I think, and I'm really careful how I phrase this, I think Flay is overperforming like way too crazy, and no way can they bring all the builds up to the Flay level. Like, I mean, we don't want every build to hit, you know, in the half a trillion range or something without a bug. So I think Flay will have to come down. But as of now, guys, Flay is the strongest build for Season 5. We will see what's going to happen after the PTR. Then there are some other good contenders, guys. So as you may know, Bash Barb has been nerfed. But with Bash, we can also make use of the new combination of items here. And you guys can kind of see here the kind of numbers that I'm doing with my Bash. And this is divided by 5 damage in comparison to what it is on the live server here. Doing like 130 like boss kill in like 10 seconds or something. So the Bash Barb is still extremely strong. However, we are back to playing a direct version of the build. And I'm going to show you the planner here real quick. Because hemorrhage is kept, and there was something funky going on with the bleeds on the PTR. So I have Bash Barb only at number 2. It's only in S tier, potentially behind these rogue builds, because they have way more consistent and way higher damage, it seems, because they already did 159 on the live server, and they're barely getting changes, and they're mostly getting buffs. Even the Victimize, I mean, the double dipping is changed, but it's getting a lot of buffs on top of this. So I'm pretty sure the rogues will all end up doing 150. And on this direct Bash Barb, it might be somewhat difficult, even though the numbers seem insane. But again, the Crown of Lucion, the Shard of Veranthiel, and also the Talisman combination with Starless Sky, I'm expecting this to be tuned down a little. So I was a bit more conservative and placing this in S tier, the direct Bash Barb. And unfortunately, you know, the bleed Bash Barb is down a lot. I think I even removed it completely because it makes no sense to play bleed now. I don't know exactly what they did. They kept hemorrhage, but I also think they changed some double dipping bugs with the dots. And I mean, that's a good thing in the end. But when I was trying the Bash Bleed Barb, it was not performing as good as I expected. And then last but not least, guys, we have our favorite build, the Bleed Whirlwind Barbarian. And there is this new cool aspect that we can also utilize in a lot of other Barbarian builds. And this one opens a lot of possibilities. It basically gives you perma berserking. While above a certain amount of fury, you berserk no matter what, and you lose some fury. But we can make this easily up with a fury per second roll on our boots or something. And this has opened up the Whirlwind build, because you guys know, without berserking, you're not proccing your bleeds because your berserk ripping ain't working. And yeah, this build has been amazing. And even on the PTR, we were managing to clear these pits. And keep in mind, the progression was completely nerfed in the PTR. And these pits are still completely speed cleared. And I think the Whirlwind Barb is one of the best starting builds for the next season. I even have a non-Uber unique setup on this now. The planners are going to be in the description in the Excel sheet. And this is just tremendous. Like, even without Uber uniques, this build is going to be insanely strong now. And it's one of the best speed farmers, one of the best builds for leveling now, and one of the best builds, I think, to gear your Barbarian, because it works even just with the tornadoes. And you just need to get this whirlwind aspect that we might get as part of the season journey, or we're going to have in the Codex of Power from the start. So this build is going to be tremendous, and I think it's going to be one of the best builds for the season. But then keep in mind, I put the Whirlwind Barb into S tier But I think for pure pit pushing, it would be more accurate to place it into A tier. But again, I also considered here that people really want to do, you know, boss killing, and they want to do speed farming with this as well. So the Flay Barb is definitely not the best build for boss killing or for speed farming, but it is the best build for pushing the pits by a significant margin. While Whirlwind Barb is good for speed farming, but not that good for pushing the pits because it has a single target problem. And so you're just gonna kind of see here, like in terms of pit pushing, the Whirlwind Barb would be in A tier, but in terms of speed farming and also in terms of fun, I mean, we spin and we win. I mean, that's the entire reason to play Barb, right? And I'm just so happy, you guys might hear it in my voice, that the Whirlwind Barb is finally back on track to where it just is an amazing build. But yeah, that is my tier list draft here for now, guys. So again, this is only a draft. Let me know what you think in the comments of where you will see different builds. And I'm really hoping for some Chain Lightning love and for some more bug fixes and for some more changes here coming the final patch notes. And I'll definitely be updating the you know, tier list again. Once we have those final patch notes, I will keep you updated. And for me, guys, you know, it just is a lot easier to already make this tier list now as the PTR is fresh, as I know, you know, the power level of many builds. And then this is like already 80% of the work done. And then the last 20%, it's going to be very comfortable for me to adjust because I already like I just ignored all the bugs. Like I just assumed that all these infinite damage bugs are going to be fixed. So it's going to be rather comfortable for me, you know, changing the builds from here on out regarding the final patch notes. And I think it also gives you a good perspective here of where the current power level of builds is at. Also to give feedback if you like. You know, because for example, for the Sorcs, I think we need some people that actually play the Sorc class and see how it also performs in terms of other builds. Because if you look at Sorcerer, for example, in a complete vacuum, well, it might be fine in some ways, right? But then you're comparing it to a Barbarian or you're comparing it to a Rogue. Well, and then you just realize how actually shit most of the Sorc builds are, right? So you realize that the Sorc needs some help. So I highly encourage you, share your thoughts, give some feedback here in the comments, but especially to Blizzard. And also, you know, on the PTR forums, be fair, but be constructive with your critique. And yeah, let's just help to make Season 5 the best it can be. I'm definitely looking forward to that. I'm going to be sharing a lot of feedback. I'm going to have a video coming up on that soon as well. I hope you enjoyed the tier list, guys. Again, it's going to be in the description. And I will see you soon, my friends, with more updates, builds, and also feedback. GG. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe, leave a like or a comment. I'm also live on Twitch almost every day, so come and say hi.